The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Spotlight on Sports, production of the William K. Sanford Colonie Town Library, and the good people in the town of Colonie produced this show, which airs on cable access channel 13. And you can see it throughout the month of June. Actually, you can see it every month at certain times. The nice thing about it is that it's staggered. So if you go to the Town of Colonie Library website, you can actually go on TV shows and schedule and then look and see when we're going to be on. Today I have a very special guest because for those of you who are probably baby boomers that would remember it best, 1980 was a stellar year for the Capital Region because it was in 1980 that we had the International Olympics in Lake Placid. Now, most people didn't think it would ever go back to Lake Placid. It was there in 1932. But the reason why it went to Lake Placid is because of the nostalgia, the beauty of Lake Placid, and the facilities that they have there. My guest today wrote a book about that called A Long Shot to Glory. And this is available on Amazon. He's a friend of mine who is also co-chair of a program that I'm happy to be part of called Age Friendly Albany County. He's the former director of the New York State Office for Aging, and he is a sports buff. And we are looking once again to bring the Olympics back to the Capital Region. My guest is Mike Burgess. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Tom.
To Spotlight on Sports. You know, when you told me about this, I was fascinated because I remember very well the 1980 Olympics, and I remember some of the problems that they have with the infrastructure and just the highway going up there. Luckily, they didn't expand it so much that it ruined the beauty of going through Essex and all of those little areas up there. But in your book, you talk about some of the struggles, and you also talk about pretty much having a dream and making that dream a reality. What happened that it came to Lake Placid in '80?
Well, they had been bidding for many years after World War II to get it back there after 1932. And they bid over and over again. In fact, many times they had the support of, they had Governor Rockefeller supporting them in 1968. But they never won. In fact, they didn't win because the Olympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee, kind of thought they were small town, small potatoes. Mm-hmm. But by 1974, when they were, in the mid-70s, they were looking at the Olympics, and Denver had won the Winter Olympics for the United States, and that was going to be in '76, the bicentennial year in Denver. It was also the 100th anniversary of Colorado as a state. But the voters rejected a bond issue in '72, and Denver pulled out. First time that ever happened. So they were scrambling around with the costs, and Lake Placid said, we can do this in perspective. We can do it back to the athletes and do it economically. And they put it in a proposal, and by '74, when they decided for 1980, everybody else had pulled out, and it was a question of either Lake Placid or canceling the games, and they took Lake Placid.
So we got it by default.
Pretty much, but they did a good job of presenting their proposal.
Okay. Now, of course, everybody, when you talk about the 1980 Olympics, you talk about the Miracle on Ice.
Right.
Almost everybody remembers that.
And Eric Heiden.
And Eric Heiden, the speed skater. But everybody thinks that we beat the Russians in the championship game. We didn't, did we?
No, we beat them in the semifinals, and then we had to win the championship on Sunday, 2 days later.
But the story behind that isn't just, I mean, America versus the Russians are like Yankees versus the Red Sox. Yeah. You know, it's like the Knicks versus the Celtics. It's always a competitive game. Right. But they had been in, was it Afghanistan that they invaded?
They invaded in Christmas time, right before the Winter Olympics. So by the time they got to Lake Placid, there was a lot of, President Carter was saying, well, the Summer Olympics, which were in Moscow, we're going to boycott those games unless you pull out of Afghanistan. And of course, Russia wouldn't do that, Soviet Union at that time. Mm-hmm. And so when they got to Lake Placid, the International Olympic Committee was having a meeting, and Secretary of State Vance went there and said, if you don't pull out, then the United States is going to boycott the Olympics, and we're going to get other countries to do that. And that all happened at Lake Placid. Meanwhile, their athletes are coming in to Lake Placid, and there were, people holding up signs against them. At the opening ceremony, there had been a little insert into the local paper, with the Afghanistan flag, I think it was. So they went through a lot, and it was during those games that the United States said, we will boycott. And the athletes, the American athletes, were not happy either.
No, I mean, they trained for their whole lives for the opportunity to go for the gold, and now they're being told no. I can remember, I think, that the President Carter at that time had what he called the Rose Garden. He stayed in the Rose Garden.
He didn't go. He had
right?
said he would go and open the Olympics, and as it was, Vice President Mondale did. And yes, he got criticized for not traveling outside of the White House during that crisis with the hostages was also going on.
Right. So all right. So the Olympics was held in Lake Placid at that time. And did they have to build an awful lot to accommodate the throngs of people?
They did have to build. I mean, the only thing that they had left pretty much was intact was the 1932 arena, which is still sitting in the center of town.
Right.
So they had to build a 1980 arena, bigger arena. But they used the old one also for some of the figure skating events. But they had to build, the new bobsled, the ski jumps, which you see coming in.
Right.
And now you and I were talking that it was in the paper here in Albany last week that they're going to build a third ski jump, a smaller one. So they built that. They did a lot of work, obviously, on the downhill skiing courses that they have and all the other things there. But the big thing was the Olympic arena, Athletes Village, which was a controversy. They had to build the housing,
right,
which became a prison, and there was a protest against that.
Still a prison.
So, yeah, so they had a number of protests along the way.
So it wasn't an easy thing to bring it there. Now, Ned Harkness was the executive director of the Lake Placid Olympic Organizing Committee, or no?
No, he wasn't. Peter Spurney became the CEO, who had run a number of other large events. He ran the Seattle World's Fair.
Was Ned part of this?
I'm sure Ned officially wasn't, but I'm sure he was around because he was involved.
Now,
he actually, now that you mention that, he ran after the Olympics. He ran ORDA, the Olympic Regional Development Authority.
Oh, that's what it was. Yes, that's right.
He became the head of that
after he left Union College, I think, and went over to there. Or he left there and went to Union.
Right.
One or the other. Ned Harkness, of course, one of the great sports figures that lived in the Capital District and was a coach at both RPI and also at Union College, and he was a great hockey player. And that's right. I remember him doing the Regional Olympic Organizing Committee. Now, is that still? Well, ORDA is a state agency that runs the Lake Placid facilities as well as Gore Mountain as well as Bel Air. So it's a state agency, and they are responsible for the upkeep of the facilities. That was the deal at the end. Was Lake Placid said we can't pay for this as a small town. Right. So the state said they would come in and maintain those facilities with a budget. So they still do have ORDA. Yes. Just and that would be the state agency that probably would oversee this whole thing if it came back in again. Yes. Now talk about Eric Heiden, because everybody says the miracle on ice, but Eric Heiden won how many golds? 5 gold medals. He won every race that he went in from short to long in Lake Placid. And he had been there 2 years earlier and won the junior championships. He was, the fastest guy alive, and his sister also raced, and I think she won a bronze medal. So they were phenomenal in the years leading up to Lake Placid, and then he skated the opening day, and he skated, 4 other times, and won every one of them. Now, Mike, you would like to see a push again for the Olympics to come back to Lake Placid, but you're looking at it more in a more global way than it was back in 1980. Well, there's no way they could accommodate all the media, all the athletes that would come back there. So they know that, and that's why they haven't bid. And I'm saying it's possible because if you actually teamed up, as the U.S. and International Olympic Committee saying, you might need a regional approach.
Well, they've talked about Albany and Montreal at one time when I think Governor Pataki had said that might be a possibility. I think Lake Placid would be interested, but I think Albany and Saratoga are actually the best partners, because Albany now has the renovated large arena, which could hold all of the, the figure skating and hockey events. Lake Placid could still hold, the ski jumps, the downhill skiing. They could use their arenas for some of the hockey. They could have the men's and the women's in different places. So they would be part of it. And then, Saratoga is well known for speed skating. And, we'd have to, unlike in '80 when it was outdoors, when Eric Heiden won in front of the high school, they'd have to build an indoor rink, which is what they use now, when they have the short track and the long track speed skating. So Saratoga would be great for that. And, it would be great to have an Olympics that was in this whole span of the area. The Russian Olympics at Sochi, that was over a long distance as well.
Right. I remember people telling me that, and it came off pretty well. I don't think it's and we're not that far. What is it by car?
Well, no more than 2.5 hours.
Right.
I mean, and from Saratoga less.
Right. I think it would be a great idea, and something that I know is being pitched as we speak to some of the leaders of our government here in Albany County.
Think about it, right.
Just to think about it, and to maybe make that phone call to the mayor up in Lake Placid and say, because I'm sure he would be thrilled with it. What a boon to the economy. And like you said, if Saratoga, anything that happens, even if we were allowed to bid, the residual effect would be amazing.
It's important to keep your name out there that you are part of the international Winter Olympic scene.
Yeah.
And people discounting Lake Placid because it's too small, but they need to realize that we have, as a region, a very large, ability to do this.
Now, where does the money come from? Where did it come from for Lake Placid?
Well, they got state and federal money. They really didn't put they didn't really put much money of their own in. Their view was that they were putting in their infrastructure. They were putting in the arena that they had. They were putting in the mountains that they had. They had the Whiteface. They had the cross-country skiing, and the ski jump was built. So they had a commitment of about $150 million from public money. And then, again, as I say, they had their own resources from the properties that they already had.
And I apologize. I'm going to have to go to detention because that was my phone that went off.
We didn't shut it off.
With another guest. No, I forgot to shut it off when I came into the library, which is a no-no in itself, not just because of this. So if it costs a lot of money just to apply, doesn't it? I mean, you have to put together quite a presentation.
Well, yeah, you have to put together a presentation and a feasibility plan. But that, Lake Placid in 2022 or 3 is running the World University Games, which they did before the '80 Olympics. That's how they made their case. They're running large events. They're still running large world championships, like for the bobsled and the luge and the downhill. Sometimes they're running international events there. So they know how to do this. And that was the thing, actually, in '80, is that they were a sports town. They knew how to do the sports. What they didn't know how to do was to pull off the major events. So they ended up having some problems, and they needed to hire a CEO. But I think we're much better equipped now, as you said, with the state ORDA, Olympic Authority. We have all of the ingredients in place to pull it off.
Now, when and if it comes to Lake Placid, if it did, you mentioned it's not large enough to hold the people that would be there. Why is it now versus 1980 that it?
Well, there's so many more athletes, but also just the media, Tom. If you have 4,000, I don't know how many thousand media. I think the last Olympics they said it was maybe even more than that. But I mean, they don't have the hotel space for that number of people. You have to have, and Albany, probably does, because we've had a lot of hotels built here lately. But not talk about economic development. If we ever had the Olympics and Albany was part of it, you'd see a lot of building around here. So it's definitely a big boom, but a city of Albany's size, and I'm not talking about just the city, but the metropolitan area, we're almost 1 million people here now.
Absolutely.
So we could definitely do this.
Yeah, the 4 counties together have just about 1 million people in it, and I mean, it's not out of the question that we could handle, support another Olympics. It's not out of the question that we could support a professional sports team either.
Right, right.
You know, because the metropolitan area, as you said, is, you know, pretty much like Buffalo.
Yeah.
You know, and they have it up there. So I want to ask you, did you go to the 80 Olympics?
Yes, that's why I was so interested in this. And I go to Lake Placid every year for my summer vacation.
You stay up on Mirror Lake, or do you stay in Lake Placid?
Oh, we stay wherever we can get a good place. We do have a timeshare there for 1 week, so we can always stay there.
Yeah. If you haven't been to Lake Placid, what a amazing bucolic area it is. It's like walking into Bavaria.
It's Switzerland of the Americas, is the way Jack Shea, the great skater from Lake Placid, said. This was when he was a young man. This is Switzerland of North America, you know.
And some of the stars that you see up there. I go up to Lake Placid as much as I possibly can, and some of the skaters like Dick Button and you know, you said Eric Heiden just went back for the first time in a long time, and Eric Heiden now is a physician.
Right. They actually have, Tom, a Miracle on Ice camp for old guys.
Is that
where some of the guys who were on the team, the hockey team, every spring they have kind of an event. It's probably, you know, when I say old guys, I mean it's people that are older than 25 who want to go up and be in a kind of a training camp for ice hockey. And so they make that an event now every year with some of the guys who are the stars of that team.
Kind of like the baseball fantasy leagues.
Yeah, that's what it's like. It's a fantasy kind of group.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. What's the first step? The first step is convincing our government fathers to get together and talk about this?
They have to first have an interest and a desire to do it. I think that that's the first step. And I know that Lake Placid has expressed interest. I think right now they are concentrating on the World University Games, but I think that what's been proposed and tossed around, like I said, Montreal, you know, some people said New York City, those are impractical. Albany has never said, we'll partner with you. And if that were said, I think you'd see some interest. So starting with that, and then, you know, once you get that far, you have to indicate to the International Olympic Committee that you are thinking about bidding, which at this point, why I said 2030, is the 2022 games are set in Beijing. The 2026 games, it's widely believed, will be in Europe, and the 2030 games, it's widely believed, will be here. So our competition would not be with the rest of the world. It would be with probably Salt Lake City, Reno, Nevada, and Lake Tahoe, which are two other places that have held the Olympics in the United States. Maybe Denver, even though it's not clear. But we would be the only city from the East that would be doing this.
And you said that you believe that the International Olympic Committee doesn't want an international venue, like Canada and...
Well, the U.S. Olympic Committee, I think, said we're not going to do that. Now, it may be that Calgary will go on its own, or Quebec City may decide to go on their own. But... you know, I think that just being in that competition would be give us international exposure, and I think it would lead to us upping our game here, you know, with our facilities.
I mean, what a great thing. Now the Times Union is going to have the NCAA men's basketball tournament here, so that's going to give us national exposure. And if we could partner with Saratoga and Lake Placid to bring the Olympics back here, that would give us the same.
I mean, we're a winter sports place. We're a hockey town. We're a place where a lot of people were just over the border from Vermont with the skiing, but we have our own skiing here too. So this is an area that has a strong winter sports tradition, and we should go with our strengths.
Now, was the downhill held at Whiteface?
Yes.
In Lake Placid?
Right.
And also Lake Placid is, if I'm not mistaken, Mount Van Hovenberg is the only bobsled
well,
run.
Salt Lake City has one
they do?
now, but we're the only ones in this part of the country.
And originally, and for a long time, they were the only ones in the country, I think.
That's right. But of course, Calgary and Vancouver do in Canada because they had the Olympics.
And if you go to Lake Placid, right in front of the high school is a wonderful skating rink. As Mike was saying, the Olympic arena is there. And I actually saw some great figure skating up there many years ago because they constantly have
over the summer.
professional sports that come in there.
Well, they're training, the future Olympians are all training there in the summer. And one of the things about the 80 Olympics was that Lake Placid won, after that, the U.S. Olympic training facility for the Olympics. There's only 3 in the country, I believe, Colorado Springs and Lake Placid, maybe one other. But we won that as a result of the 1980 Olympics. And when you go to the old, out in front of the high school, I know you'll love this, is that there's now a great big board out there, as you know, outside the rink there, the outdoor rink, and it says Legends of the Oval. And there are 5 people from Lake Placid, or maybe all together. I think there are 5 from Lake Placid, Jack Shea and some of the guys who were in the early days, pictures of them.
Is that right?
Yeah, so when next time you're there, check that out. It's right on the end of the oval looking at the new arena. Legends of the Oval, great big, like a billboard almost.
So how important would it be for the state to get involved in this? That would be ultimately...
the state would have to, because they run ORDA and they also would have the money that we would want.
Right. So that would be a major.
And I think Governor Cuomo would certainly be, I would think, a supporter of this idea.
He seems like the type of guy that would like to have something like that here. It would also be good for the state. It would be good for his profile, I think.
And it would be good for the economy.
And good for the economy, and that's what we have to remember. All right, talk about the book. What got you interested in writing a book?
Well, first I'd been there at the 1980 games. And I was probably like you and other people, I collected a lot of stuff from there, and I had a lot of newspapers from those days, and I just had a great nostalgia about it. And as I say, we go there every year, but I talked with a lot of people up there and heard some of the backstories about Denver, you know, not taking the Olympics. So I thought, you know, they've written about the Miracle on Ice. There's been a movie about it. There's been all kinds of things. People don't realize that there was this other miracle. They even got the Olympics.
Right.
And when I began to look at some of the old clippings I had, and I said, you know, I remember all this about the prison and the fights over that. I said, nobody ever wrote the story. I would go in the bookstore up there and I'd look at all the books about the Olympics. And there was one that was about the 80 Olympics, but it was written before. It was like their bid for the games. But nobody ever completed that, you know, and wrote the real history. So what I tried to do is really write the story of the whole thing, of how they started. Actually, I went all the way back to 32, you know, how they got the games, and then they tried to get them several more times and never did. And then the culmination of this. And I spent a lot of time talking about 80 and that night. There were several people from Albany. In fact, if I do this again or update it, I have a lot more people who told me they were there.
Yeah.
And it would be great to have those personal stories, because people here have told me, I was out in the crowd when they won the hockey game. I was outside and you couldn't even move, you know. So I put a lot of that in. An older guy who I know from Lake Placid said, the sound was so great outside from the arena when we were winning the game. He said you could hear it bouncing off the mountains.
Imagine that. Yeah. There were just tens of thousands of people gathered in the streets to celebrate the Miracle on Ice.
And you know, as younger people go up there, and the book, by the way, is in the bookstore up there and in Albany, a lot of people buy the book because it's like they go to Lake Placid, well, how did the Olympics ever happen here?
Yeah.
And they want to know the story, and they don't realize, for example, things that you and I would know, that hockey game was tape delayed in the United States because they didn't want to show it. They had an agreement, you know, that they couldn't show it except later. And the funny thing was that they get Canadian television up in the North Country, and they were on live. So the people who were in Lake Placid who weren't at the game, they were watching the game on television from Canada, so they knew.
They knew exactly.
But the rest of the people, I had a sneaking suspicion when Jim McKay came on and he was sitting outside being the MC, and there were all these people around him jumping up and down. I said, something must have happened with this game. And he kept saying, we'll be showing this game later, and it's you'll want to see this game.
Well, he probably a lot of times what they do is they don't want to diminish the crowd that goes in there, so they don't show it live. You know, they show it on a tape delay or whatever. You know.
Well, they had some agreement with the Russians about the fact that the Russians wanted to. Their television had some rights to it or whatever, but the Russians wouldn't change the plan, and that meant, in other words, it was going to be shown at 7 sometime later in the evening in the United States, but it would be a time when the Russians could watch it over there.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't want to change that.
Yeah. Is this the first book you've written?
Well, actually, no. I wrote another one about senior advocacy,
Okay.
about the history of seniors and the EPIC program and how they came to the Capitol and fought for their rights and so forth. But I wrote another one after this, okay, about about Jack Shea, who won the gold medal. He was 32. The Eric Heiden of 32, and he was from Lake Placid, and that book is called Keeper of the Olympic Flame, and it's about how Jack refused to skate in Nazi Germany in 1936 because many of the family had a market there, and many Jewish customers in the summer. And they said, "Please, Jack, don't skate in Germany." And he honored that request and stood up and protested against it.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. It's amazing that you and I'm glad that you put your thoughts and your experiences down in this book and the facts in the book. You know, the name of the book once again is A Long Shot to Glory, and it's available in the bookstores in Lake Placid and also on Amazon.
And in Saratoga and Albany bookstores.
Okay, and Saratoga and Albany bookstores. So if you want to get a look at the background and how it all came to fruition in Lake Placid in 1980, you can go and get this book. I want to also say that Michael is the former director, this is why he did senior advocacy, of the New York State Office for Aging, and he's the co-chairman of the Age-Friendly Albany County program. And, you know, I was thinking, you know, my mother was lucky enough to be up in the Lake Placid area for the entire thing. And I was thinking about senior citizens. She was 70 years old, and no, she was 68 years old. And I called her one day, and she was out cross-country skiing. And it's a great opportunity for, not just for older people, for everyone, if they're up there, is also to participate in the winter sports that they have up there. But Lake Placid has become a year-round destination now, I think.
Well, one other point in the book was that they said if we don't get the Olympics, we're going to be a town left behind. We're going to be nothing. And they said if we could get the Olympics, it would make the future for us. And you know, they were absolutely right, because today Lake Placid, as a result of having the training facility, having all the things that Orta's running, the tourism with the bobsled and so forth, and the downhill skiing, it has been an economic engine to make that a great tourist spot, much bigger than it was before the games.
Yeah, I had to go to a the State Association of Counties meeting up there, and we got to stay 3 days up in Lake Placid, and man, it was a wonderful. The weather was perfect, and it was just a wonderful area to go. It's God's country up in the Adirondacks.
Well, you might remember this before the '80 Olympics. The town was basically shut down after the summer and before the winter. Now, with all the conferences and things, there's very few times when they don't have people coming in for some events. I would say maybe just a few weeks in November and maybe April when things slow down a little bit. But they have the Ironman there now in the summer, which is a big thing. The horse shows are there in July, from the state horse show and the local horse show. And then in the fall, it seems like every state association here in Albany somebody's having a conference up in Lake Placid.
That's right. And I have a cousin, I'll say, the great singer Kate Smith lived in Lake Placid. Yeah. And I have a cousin who was they wouldn't allow her to be buried in the
underground.
Right.
Above ground.
Above ground in a mausoleum in the cemetery. Until my cousin, Father Bob Lamedy, took over as pastor of the church, and he allowed her to be buried there. And I think Bob was all about getting money for the parish.
She left.
Yes.
Half of her money.
Half of her money went to the church.
And the other half to the Sisters of Mercy.
Right. Exactly. So she is buried now in that cemetery.
She's got the only, I've driven in that cemetery, and she's the only one in a mausoleum, I think.
That's right. Well, Mike, I want to thank you for being with us. This is a great conversation, and I look forward to having you on many more times as we build up to this dream of having the Olympics back in Lake Placid. You know, I hope that you carry the banner for a while and see what can happen because you have some contacts, and what can happen with our government leaders. Hopefully it will happen. Maybe the next time we'll have the mayor of Lake Placid on here to give it another push. So I want to thank you all for watching Spotlight on Sports today, and please join us again next month, and we will have another guest from the world of sports. I'm Tom Scarff. Thank you.